Hello YouTubes, welcome to my new segment, Decoder Days. Today we're working on this Santa Fe War Bonnet Athearn Blue Box PA-1, and we're going to add a simple mobile decoder, which means it does power and lights. That's it. Should be easy, right? If you're new to DCC decoders, I will try to make this as simplified as possible. Let's get inside and I'll show you what's going on. I have already been inside this particular locomotive to add a couple of LEDs. And I know that this is the older style of Athearn with the steel flywheels rather than the brass ones, but it still runs fine, which is why I'm going to add the decoder today. Now, there's my little LEDs front and back, very basically soldered onto the front and the back. Okay, let's begin. First thing we need to do is figure out where we're getting the power from. So that's the front. The power gets picked up from this side of the wheels and that side of the wheels. On this side, it comes up to these little tabs here, feeds along this bar and goes to one side of the motor. The other side of the rails, power comes up and actually goes into the chassis itself, which is picked up from the bottom of the motor, which I'll show you in a little while. So the first thing I'm going to do is disassemble. We're not going to need this power bar anymore. This basically connects the front to the back on this side of the rails, and the power gets fed in to a little brush through there. Next up, I think what we will do is remove the trucks, because I want to strip them down and clean them. Pretty easy to do that also. All we need is a little screwdriver. I'm going to remove this little clip here. Under there, make sure you don't lose your little worm gear. And that drops down. Same on the other side. Screwdriver, best to come under this way rather than in there. Keep your finger on top of the clip because it does like to ping across the floor. And the other worm gear out. I did lube these up, but as you can see it's still a bit dirty, so these trucks do need a good clean. Can remove that. I'm going to spin it round, put it there, try to keep everything the right way around. That's our main components. So as I say, I'm going to strip these down, clean the wheels, clean the gears, and get them ready for the next stage. See you in a sec. Right, that's my truck's wheels and gears all cleaned and lubed. They're ready to go back in. A quick point of note, because the power comes through the chassis and goes to this side of the truck here and here, you see these little locating holes there and there? They line up with that pin there and that pin there. So it's important to make sure that's clean and that's clean, that's clean and that's clean. Let me give you a quick demo. So that will slide in there. You see the pin, you see the hole, that locates in there and rotates. So it's vital that that's clean and that's clean. Okay, can't stress that enough. I do have something else to clean, which will be the commutator and the motor, but I'll do that when I've removed the motor. But first, I'm going to give you a quick explanation on how the decoder works, or at least how the decoder that I'm going to install works. This is a basic DH126 decoder. All it really does is control movement forward and back, front headlight, rear light, that's it. This particular decoder has 9 wires, but the purple and the green are not used, so presumably this is just a generic wiring harness. Some of the harnesses just have wires. This particular one has a plug, so this would be a DH126P S. S stands for short, some of them are a little bit longer. How does it work? It's really quite simple. I wouldn't overthink this, okay? Basically what this chip is doing is intercepting the power coming from the rails. So normally you would have 2 sources of power, left and right rail, going to one side and the other side of the motor. So instead of that happening, the power is coming from the rails, goes into the decoder, and then 2 other wires come out the decoder and go to the motor. That's pretty much it. It's really not rocket surgery. So in this particular instance, because it's an Athearn blue box, the power for the other side of the motor actually travels down into the chassis. So we need to isolate the motor from the chassis, and that's what I'm going to do now. The motor is held in place by two plastic or flexible plastic motor mounts down there. You can see the little white lines there and there, and they poke through to the bottom of the chassis itself. Now, there's a couple of ways you can remove this. Personally, I like to just put a little bit of oil down there, just a little squidge. You could probably use dish soap, which would clean up better than oil, but hey. And then you could try and just wiggle the motor and pull it gently, and it might pop out. You do have to be careful because this age of motor mount is going to be quite fragile. So what happened there was the plastic mounts kind of overlap a little bit. You can see a little channel, and that channel goes in there and there and there and there. But because it's flexible, I managed to get it out. But I will have to remove these in order to get this back in, because you can't pop that in that way. The way to do that, which is probably what I should have started with, get a small Phillips screwdriver. I actually think maybe a little hex driver would be better, because you might end up poking a hole down your mounts. But basically you want to push these two down the way, gently. Try not to stab yourself. Push that down, and hopefully that will pop up like that. Do the other one, out it comes. So it appears that these actually are in pretty good condition. Sometimes they just tear. I think we're going to be okay with these two, because we do need to reuse these. Well, we don't need to, we could probably come up with some other method. But I think that's why the oil helps in this instant. You can see it's a bit shiny. So we're going to clean that off, because it should be supple enough to get back in without more oil. Okay, now here's the next thing. You'll see at the bottom of the motor there's these two little tangs sticking out, which connect to this little bar which goes onto the brush. So that's one side of the power going in to the motor, and that's the top side that we talked about earlier. Now that works by those little tangs connecting or touching down onto the base of the chassis. You could possibly see a couple of little marks there and there, which is where those little tangs have been digging in. But we need to isolate that. So what I'm going to do is put a bit of tape along here. And then the next thing is, we have a choice. You can either just cut those little tangs off, or we can take this whole section off, take this whole section off, swap them over so the flat side is at the bottom. I prefer to do that. It also means I can take the brushes out and clean the commutator. So that's what I'm going to do now. We just need a little levering device. Now remember, your brushes are hiding in here, so be careful when you do this that the spring doesn't ping away. It comes off pretty easily, but the spring does like to run away. So that comes off, spring comes out, brush comes out. Oh, it's a nice big brush. It's not seeing a lot of action. Put that to the side. Get the other one off. Spring out, brush out, like so. Now, the other reason I like to do this is I can get right into the commutator and clean it up without fouling up the brushes. So that makes sense as well. Just going to use a bit of IPA, give this a quick clean. And if you've got this far, then it's also worthwhile to get a little sharp implement like a toothpick. Something soft, or at least softer than the metal, because you don't want to score this, because what I'm going to do is get into these little grooves and make sure that they're not holding any bits of shrapnel which could foul up your brushes. like so. Just make sure there's nothing lying about. This isn't meant to be a cleaning restoration video, but it's important to do this while you're here. Make sure everything's going to be running as well as it possibly can. And also while I'm here, I'm just going to put a little squidge of oil in that bearing right there. It's the best time because we'll get access, and also a little bit down that side. Try not to get it on the commutator. Okay, let's move on. Let's move that out the way for a second because I do want to put a bit of tape down here to isolate it. Now, you could use Kapton tape, but honestly I find just a bit of insulating tape works just fine. And also Kapton tape doesn't always like to stick to cold metal, whereas insulating tape is fairly reliable. It doesn't need to be a huge amount because remember we're going to swap over the tined one for the flat one, so it's not going to be poking down. But again, we don't want to take any risks because then you could short out your decoder and chaos ensues. I just like this to be as neat as possible. That should do it. Let's get him in there. Bear in mind you've got to leave room for the holes for the mounts to go back in, so you don't want to fill that whole channel. Okay, that's that bit done. Let's get back to the motor and I'll explain how we're going to make this work. So because we've now isolated the chassis, we need a way to connect the lower section brush to your decoder, okay? So what we're going to do is, with our flat bar, which will sit like this once the spring and brush is in, we're just going to solder a little wire down here, okay? And then that wire will come up here and connect to the decoder. And it's important to do this before you install it, because if you try soldering wires on while it's installed, you risk melting plastic. So let us do that. Make sure that's clean. I've got a little brass wire brush that I like to use for this. And that wee groove, just make sure it's nice and clean, and it's going to take a solder nice and easy. Clean that with a bit of IPA, little wire brush, give it a little wipe. And I'm going to find a corresponding colour wire to solder to this, which we'll get to later, but for the moment it's going to be grey. Okay, as I say, we'll explain why when we get to that bit. Okay, I have a little bit of grey wire. Let's put this onto my little helping hand. We're going to solder a bit of grey wire onto that side here. First thing I like to do is get a bit of flux in here, a bit of flux in the wire, nice clean soldering iron, bit of solder. Let's tin this wire up first, and we are going to get some solder in here. Like so. Now we're going to attach our grey wire. Lovely. Nice good connection in there. Don't immediately touch that, it will be hot. Move that to the side. And now we can actually reassemble this motor. Commutator's clean, our bars are ready. So, the lower side is the one with the 4 holes. I'll just show you for now because you won't get to see this once I'm trying to install it. But those little grooves there go in here, and then that will get forced into those 4 chassis holes. But first, obviously, we need to put our little bar on. So we need 1 spring, pop that in there, 1 brush. That's the wrong way around. Goodness. Let's try putting the brush in first, shall we? Then the spring. And our freshly solder wired bar. This only goes on one way. If you have a look there, there's this different end on each side. The hook side goes furthest away from the spring and brush, so that it can just clip on one side and then clip down like so. And that side is good to go. Top side, we can just put that on straight away. Unless you want to do something with these tangs, you could cut them off, or you could just bend them down. I think I'll just bend them down for now, to be honest. They're not doing any harm, but they might get in the way if they're sticking up too far. Nah, you know what? Because of the way this is being constructed, you can't actually bend this flat. It's always going to be sticking up. So let's just cut them off. We don't need them. Hey, it's weight saving, right? Okay. Now, we will be attaching another wire to the top of this, but it doesn't have to be at the end, so we don't have to do it right away. Right, let's get this on the motor, see if I can remember to get this the right way around. So, get our brush in first, then our little spring, and as like the other side, it can only go on one way. So that hook goes over away from the spring and brush. Hooks down there, clippity clip. Motor's good to go. So, let's get these back on and hope we can wiggle this back into place. This can sometimes be an absolute pain, but because this came out quite easily, I don't think we're going to have that much trouble. It's important to note that the commutator side goes forward and the curved section on the chassis here is the forward, so it goes in that way. Yeah, that's it in. So it's a wee bit wobbly because it's quite old, but it should be fine. It should be fine. So our motor is ready. It's wired on one side. Obviously, we still need to get it wired on the top side, so let's move on to that. At this stage, we can put our trucks back in. And if you remember correctly, the truck with the coupler was at the back, the curved bit's at the front, so he can pop in there. And we can put our worm gear back on and into its little shaft. Make sure you don't lose these little thrust washers there. One side is in, other side needs to clip down like so. Still spinning, turning the wheels. Right, let's get the other side in. Poke you through there. Drive shaft in. Clip you down. There we go. So you can see the two halves of the clip are together there. Motor still turns. Moves the loco that direction. Okay, that's the hard stuff done. Now, let's go on with the decoder and how we're going to install it. So because we've now isolated the motor, we need to figure out a way to get the power into the decoder. So from the left side of the track, the power goes through the chassis, but it no longer goes to the motor. It goes up this side of the truck here, And as you can see, I've got some solder on there, which was from the LED that I installed. So we can take that connection there for one side of the track. That's the same side of the track, but on the rear truck. For the other side of the track, we're going to use this bar here and this bar here. So what we're going to do is we're going to connect that point there to that point there, just so that we've got as wide a range of pickup as possible, and connect that bar there to that bar there. And then once we've got them, we can intersect those two wires and splice them into the decoder for the power into the decoder. Now this decoder, as you may have noticed, has got a little plug. This is a DH126P. P stands for plug, I presume. But some of them just have wires, and the wiring harness can be quite long. So for this particular type of decoder, and they're probably all much the same, the black wire and the red wire are the power in to the decoder, okay? So I'm going to take the black power from that side of the loco, and the red will be coming from this side of the loco. So let's say I run a red wire from there to there, cut it in the middle, splice it into this red wire. Black wire from that point to that point, cut it, splice it into this black wire. So that's the power going into the decoder. The power going to the motor is orange and grey, hence the grey wire, okay? So the orange wire will obviously need to terminate on this side of the motor up at the brush. So what I'll do right now is just put a blob of solder on there, add a little bit of orange wire, and then we can proceed to how I'm going to actually install this, because obviously it's going to flop about if I leave it like that. Right, let me get this soldered on first. There's my little orange wire. Let's trim him back a little bit. Let's give him a bit of tinning. Soldering iron is not hot enough yet. There we go. And now obviously I need to put a bit of solder on there. That's way too much paste. Nice little blob there. And let's get our orange wire on. So that's our two main wires going to the motor. Grey, orange. They have to go into the decoder now. So where am I going to put the decoder? Well, because I've got a 3D printer, I've made one of these little platforms which clips over the top like so. But then, what is the point of the plug? Okay, now because this one's got a plug, it obviously has to plug into something. So I bought some of these little PCBs from AliExpress, and that can sit right there. And then the little plug plugs in there. Okay, now you can't do this with every loco because you don't have that much space. But I'm pretty confident that I've got plenty of room inside there. So that's how I'm going to do it. Now, the first thing I would like to do, I've got that in the wrong way around, because I want to feed this little orange wire through that slot. And likewise, I want the little grey wire going through that slot. Like so. And that just keeps it out the way. I might actually put a dab of hot glue just to stop that potentially rubbing against the flywheel, but not right now. We can always do that if we have to. So that's our two wires going to the motor from the decoder. Okay. They can come up through, let's see, where can they go? I think I'll just put them this side, because these two wires connect to M1 and M2 in this little board. While we're here, you have 4 connections here and 4 connections there, okay? Left track, right track, left track, right track. And the way that works is, for the left track, we're going to take the power from the left side of the rails, which is going to be from that point there. So there'll be a wire going from there to there. Right track is going to be going from the right side of the rail, which comes up here. So I need to run a wire from there to there. Likewise at the back, bit of wire from that solder point to LT, and from that tab to RT. The other two connections in the middle, they are for the front headlight and the rear headlight. Are you with me so far? Good. Let me get the motor wires soldered on. I can obviously trim these right down now. Now you're probably wondering why on earth I made them orange and grey. That's really just in case I ever want to change out this board and maybe change to not having a plug, and then at least I know that the orange wire there and the grey wire there goes to there and there. That's the reason that they're colour coded for now. So let me solder these on, solder those two, make a wire, and I'll see you when all that's done. Okay, my main wiring is done, so here's a bit of a recap. I had mentioned before that I was going to run a black wire from this truck to this truck and then intercept it. Obviously, I don't need to do that for this type of decoder with the plug. But basically what that's doing is it's feeding in basically to the black wire of the decoder. Okay, that's where that pin intersects. And likewise the red, if I had completed this wire all the way along and cut it, it would have joined onto that red wire there. So that's how that's working. For the motor comes out here and here, M1 and M2. And from previous experience, I've noticed that the red or the positive is M2 for some weird reason. It's not the end of the world if it's the wrong way around. You can change the direction in your actual digital command station if it's anything more than just the basic one. So we are pretty much good to go. I've not wired up any lights at the moment. All we have to do for now to test it is plug in our decoder into our little pins. Now, there's 8 pins and it's not sided, but again, from previous experience, I've noticed that pins number 1 and 8 correspond to the red and orange wires. So as you can see, red is there, orange is there, 1 is there, 8 is there, so it has to go this way. So that should slot in like so. Make sure you don't misalign your pins and bend them, especially if it's a used decoder that's been in something else. So that's slotted in there. We should be good to go. So this is going to sit over either there or around there. Probably there. I think I've got better room at that side. But let's get to the track, make sure it works. Excuse me for 10 minutes till I get these 12 wheels on. I think we are good. Now, new decoders are usually set to address number 3, and this is a used one. Well, it's quite new, but I took it out of another loco, so I reset it back to loco number 3. Enter that, give it some juice, and we should go. Let's find out. Once I switch over to DCC, of course. Okay, let's give it some, and we're going backwards. Which means those little wires there, the orange and the grey, are the wrong way around. Let me change that. Now, I did mention that I could change those settings in my command station. However, I've got my soldering iron set up, so I may as well just swap them over. Simples. Okay, should work this time properly. Let's go back to the track. And yes, I could have just edited that bit out, but you know what? Sometimes you learn by your mistakes, and hopefully you will learn by my mistakes. Right, we're on the track again. We're still at loco number 3. We're in the forward position. Let's give it some power and see what happens. It's going forward this time. That's good. Hit change direction. This is a great thing about DCC. I hit the change direction button. It's gradually slowing down and it should go into reverse and start coming back down the hill. Here he comes. Now bear in mind I did clean and lube everything, so it's going to need a bit of a run round the track. But even at that, it's running pretty smooth. Oh, it's running a wee bit fast. Slow down. So this is another thing I love about DCC. I've actually turned the speed all the way down, but it will gradually slow down by itself. Change direction, speed it up, and it will gradually speed up. So a lot of people think DCC is all about sounds, horns and whistles and all that, but for me it's about control and realism. I've obviously set this decoder to do a very gentle speed up, slow down, change direction. Bear in mind, this is doing it all by itself. Once I hit the change direction button, it will automatically slow down. So I've hit direction forward, slowing down gradually, and then it will start moving forward gradually. Love it. Okay, next thing, LEDs. Before I do that, however, we have a slight problem. I have miscalculated the height from there to there and there to there. And my body, as you can see, sits lower than the height of that decoder. So, remember what I was saying earlier about joining the wires? I need to do that. Give me a sec. So I need to remove all my solders. That one. Tell you what you should probably do is remove your decoder before you do that, just in case. You don't want to fry anything. Remove this. This isn't the end of the world, folks. The hard part is done. The rest is just going to be wiring it up. Just wires to wires, basically. And you should know by now where everything goes. Right, let's see if I can remove this that I, in my infinite wisdom, decided to hot glue on. I could probably get the hot glue gun in there and heat it up, but it should just leave it off. Like so. So we won't be able to use our little PCB board after all. But that's okay. I've got all my wires here. Now, all I have to do then is find a harness that's a bit longer than that one. I can still use the same decoder because this is just a plug. I can take this out. As you can see, it just pops out without any problem at all. Come on. It's only ever been in here once, so it's pretty tight. Let's just chill. Just leave it out bit by bit. Oh, nearly stabbed myself there. This is not for coming out. Come on, get off. There we go. Okay, so we're going to hold on to that because we've already programmed that with a bit of, well, we've put the address in, but obviously there's not a lot of wire there to play with. So let us crack open a new decoder that's got extra wire. So this is the same decoder, it just doesn't have the plug harness, that's all. Actually, it does have the plug harness. What I meant was we're not going to be using the plug harness, but there's more wire. So we're just going to snip all of them. We'll leave enough room so that we can rejoin this onto something. But this is just the bit that we need. We'll put the wee plug back in the bag, back in the shelf. Okay. So, as I said before, we're not using the purple, so we'll snip that, but not too short. We're not using the green. We have a black wire, which is going to have to join to those two wires there. We have a red wire, which is going to join to those two red wires there. We have the orange, which goes to that one. And the grey one goes to that one. The other three wires are for the lights, but we're not doing that right now. So let me just fire ahead and see if I can join all these wires together. So obviously not as neat and tidy as it would be with the little board, but should do the job. Okay, I'll give you a very quick look and then we'll try it in the track again. So we have this right side of the track connecting to that truck. It goes all the way along to this truck, connects there. And then the red wire going into the decoder takes a feed off of that. So technically this little red wire is taking power from both of these. Likewise the black wire. I couldn't find a wire fine enough, so I've used this gigantic chunky black wire, which again is connecting the front truck to the back truck. Then there's another little black wire going into the decoder, and then the orange and the grey wire go down to the motor, which is another good reason that I wired up, or I soldered on grey and orange wires down to the motor, just for this sort of occurrence. Anyway, it looks awful, but it should work. Let's try. So it should run exactly the same as it did before, because I've not changed anything other than the wire routing. The decoder's the same. Let's make sure. Forward, please. Yeah, forward is working, thank goodness. Hit the direction button there. Slows down and plays reverse. Lovely. It's already getting a bit quieter, which is nice. Not that it was mega loud or anything, but... And change the direction again. Lovely. Okay. And stop. Okay, now we can put an LED in the front. If the body fits on. Yeah, it should be fine this time. It's just so untidy without using the board with the wires everywhere. Okay, good. Right, now I need to take it off again. All I'm going to do is put in an LED in the front. I'm not going to do the back because these are designed to have coaches or a B unit attached all the time, so apart from anything else there isn't really anywhere to put a light. So let me wire up an LED. You don't need to see that, I've done tons of videos on LEDs. Click up there if you want to see one, and I'll see you back in the track for a final victory lap, hopefully. So I was seriously considering not uploading this video. It was such a mess. However, life isn't perfect. Things don't always go to plan. In fact, things never go to plan in my layout. But we got there in the end, and I think it's important to learn from my mistakes and move on. Okay, my PA-1 Santa Fe war bonnet. It's on the track. Let's test it round the layout. Let us begin with the headlight. Yay, that works. Got something right. Okay, let's have a little trip round the layout. Not the smoothest video I've ever made, but we got there in the end. I appreciate your patience. Thanks to these wonderful people, my Patreon supporters, my YouTube members, and all my gift givers. Thank you very much, really appreciate you. And if you'd like to help with my channel, click the links below, thank you. Anyway, that one's done. Hopefully next week it'll be a little bit easier and a bit smoother. Bye for now.